Hello, my name is Stephen Kilgore, and I'm the managing editor of Feed and Grain magazine and the host of the Feed and Grain podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today as we dive deep into the issues affecting the feed manufacturing, grain handling, and allied industries. Today's episode is brought to you by the Bin Whip from Newmat Systems. The powerful dual impact Bin Whip removes the toughest buildup and blockages in industrial storage silos without hazardous silo entry. Learn more today at binwhip.com. So today I edited an interview that I did a while back with Jim Kramer, general manager of CHS, about the grain elevator they built in Herman, Minnesota. This grain elevator was pretty interesting because it was built via lights out facility. Plus, it was built over the COVID-19 pandemic, which gave it a whole bunch of construction challenges that they were able to overcome. It's a really neat story, so I'm really glad you're going to get to listen to it because this is an example of an interview that I would normally turn into cover story, but you'd end up getting such a small portion of what we actually talked about in that story. It's really nice that you guys will get to hear everything that we do. Thank you so much for listening to the Feed and Grain podcast. I hope you're having a great summer. And if you're listening to this in a podcasting app, please give us a review or a rating. It really helps us out. If you prefer listening to this in your browser, make sure you sign up for Industry Watch, our newsletter, and we'll keep you up to date on all the newest podcasts that are coming out. With that out of the way, thank you for listening. Now, on to the show. Why don't we kind of dive in? So can you guys go a little bit, go over kind of like the planning process of this elevator in Herman?
The planning process as far as building the
Yeah.
whole facility.
Like, well, what kind of brought you to the decision of like this is the place to build?
Okay.
We what was the need
Yep.
and how did you feel it?
Sure. So we've had an existing shuttle facility in the town of Herman, for a long time, quite honestly. It
Mm,
was an elevator that we've retrofitted over the years, added some storage, added a second dump pit, but it was still, a 1970s model elevator.
mm,
And so the scale was over the pit. And anytime you have that, it typically isn't as fast as the producer would like. So we looked at different ways that we could retrofit further at the location in town. And
okay,
we own some property just on the outside of town. We're about a mile north of Herman. We're still in city limits,
sure.
but it's out on its own little parcel. And we've got a 32,000 ton fertilizer plant here, and the main office is here. So we had acreage to build new. And after we looked long and hard at how to do something in town, at the end of the day, it was going to be expensive, and we were
Mm,
going to really kind of get what we always had. So what this allowed us to do is start fresh and do it the right way. So we are about a mile from our existing shuttle. We built another shuttle that's state of the art and allowed us the speed that the farmer desires,
sure.
along with adding space because we could have used more upright space the way the producer takes the crop off these days. One of the things that the producer is doing is they continue to invest in efficiencies, and
Mhm.
that's both putting the crop in and taking the crop off. And so that's what the commercial, us in this case, are trying to stay ahead of is
Yeah.
being able to make sure that we can get fertilizer to the ground ahead of the producer as well as uh, stay ahead of them as we take corn and beans off in the fall of the year.
Yeah, sure. Um, so I have noticed that it seems like well, a lot of elevators are kind of running into that situation too, like being in a downtown location, even if they weren't once a part of town, the town has kind of evolved around them,
Right.
and so you see a lot of moves a little bit outside of it, just more space
Right.
and a less, especially traffic concerns and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Um,
we actually bought 50 acres at about 2007 or 8, and
okay.
so we've got this whole facility now that's just exactly what you described. We've got some ability to sprawl here a little bit without
Mhm.
getting too many things on top of us.
Yeah, yeah. That seems to be the way that I mean, it's especially since now people are more and more, I don't know, anti-industry in their backyard, it seems sometimes. So,
Yeah, yeah. It seems like the people that live in town, they don't want a lot of that truck traffic.
Nope.
And quite honestly, the producers don't want to have to fight around town with the truck traffic. Now, in saying all that, Herman's a town of about 400 people, so it's not like it's a big city that we're trying to maneuver around.
Yeah, yeah. Excellent. So can you go a little bit about into the kind of the planning of the construction phase?
Okay. So CHS has its own construction department.
Okay.
Jim Gales heads up that department, and so I've worked with Jim for years now on various projects. So we sat down and worked through what we thought we needed for the project from a speed and space standpoint, and got my department, the rest of my department involved, the grain guys inside the department, and put together a plan. And then we took that to various contractors and looked at what they had for thoughts around our plan, tweaked
Hmm.
it, toured a couple of other facilities that had recently built, and tweaked it some more, and that's how we came up with the version that we ended up building.
Nice.
Yeah.
Uh, so what kind of got you? What were your what were the things that you needed for this new facility?
Okay, the first and the reason for it was, again, speed and space. The producer's he's so quick at taking the crop off, and we just weren't able to dump enough trucks per hour. And so we'd have many days of long lines at the elevator just because we just couldn't get enough trucks through. And what this allowed us to do is now we've added 3 more dump pits, and they're high speed. So that's rated at 25,000 bushels per hour per dump pit, and we've added 3 new dump pits. So
Wow.
just the new facilities rated at 75,000 an hour, and then we can dump another 25,000 bushels an hour at our uptown location. So today, if you were able to evenly spread out your trucks throughout our facilities in Herman, we'd be able to dump about 100,000 bushels an hour. Now, that's what it's rated at. You physically can't get that many trucks through the whole system, grading the grain and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
But
know those
but what
numbers
it
are
does,
always.
it took us from two, a 2 dump pit location to a 5 dump pit location. So, not everything is going through the hourglass in the same spot, so to speak. So we were able to. It just makes for a lot better experience for our grower. Not waiting in
Sure.
line. It's just state of the art. It's slick and fast. And then the second thing is the storage piece.
Hmm.
The facility is 1.4 million bushels, so we've got
Okay.
2 million bushels of space that is currently uptown at their old facility. So we added 1.4 million to it. So now we're just under 3.5 million of total
Wow.
space at our location.
So you guys are planning to keep the other facility in kind of operation, at least for now?
Yes. Yep. We'll continue to utilize it. It's not that it's obsolete by any means.
Hmm.
Quite honestly, by doing what we did out here, we've extended the life of that
Oh,
one
good.
because about 80% of the grain will end up going through the new facility, and we'll continue to utilize the old facility. It's still operational and it still provides value to us and the producer.
Nice. Um, how was the construction process? When did you guys kind of start, and how did it go?
Well, we started the construction in the late summer, early fall of 2019.
Okay.
So that's when we dug the first hole, and they started the whole process. The actual elevator was scheduled to be slipped about the middle of May in
Hmm.
2020.
Okay.
And that was unique because that is obviously right kind of in the height of the pandemic hitting,
Yeah,
and that was back when we didn't know a lot about it in May.
I
So
know.
created a lot of obstacles and created just a lot of uniqueness to this particular facility.
Yeah. Did you have anything in particular that pandemic obstacles that you guys had to get around?
Yeah, for sure. So back in May of 2020, again, we were still learning about what the pandemic meant.
Hmm.
So uh, atypically when you do a slip project for an elevator, you bring in a lot of people from outside the area.
Yeah.
It's a specific crew that they bring in to do these because they're atypically they should take about six. This one should have taken about 6.5 days. So they bring all these people in to do it. First, they were nervous coming in because they didn't know anything about Herman, and so
Sure.
what were they coming into from a pandemic standpoint? And then the local people around Herman weren't real excited about bringing people in. You know, what were they going to bring
Mm-hmm.
in to Herman? So we had to get through that whole thing. We ended up not getting a full, um, what's the word, a full employee base that we needed.
Okay.
So the slip, instead of taking about 6.5 days, took about 12 days.
Okay.
And then a couple other things that we did that was unique is that so we provided meals for all the employees that were on that
Oh,
project. Uh,
nice.
it was two 12-hour shifts. So as they came on, they got a meal, and as they came off, they got a meal. So we fed them going on the slip in the morning at 6 o'clock, and we fed them coming off the slip in the evening at 6 o'clock, and the same thing. Fed the new shift that was going on at 6 o'clock at night, and then we fed them going off the shift at 6 o'clock in the morning. And what that did is it kept them out of all the
Mhm.
eateries in the towns in and around Herman.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a step we took to try to make everybody both feel comfortable that was working the project, but also the people in and around Herman that were involved in the whole thing. So ended up
Yeah.
renting the whole hotel in Morris.
Okay.
So they basically, you know, quarantine, not quarantine, that's probably not the right word, but it kept everybody in the same area. So we did
Tried to
everything that we could to, yeah,
They
isolate.
tried
There
to
you go.
isolate them.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Yep. And worked with our local health people. We had several conference calls ahead of the slip just to make sure we had the right protocol in place and all the COVID screening and that kind of stuff. That's pretty,
Yeah.
rubber stamp now. We did all that stuff back then. Every shift we took temperatures and that kind of stuff. So it was definitely
Yeah.
unique, and um, it made it more difficult for sure. But we were able to get through it.
Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, especially back then when no one really knew what was happening or going on, and then also, I mean, building that phase is already stressful enough. I can't imagine
Right.
having to go ahead and make all these arrangements on top of it.
Right.
That's quite the feat.
Yes. And of course, timing. We needed to get it done in May in order to hit harvest in
Hmm.
2020. So we were trying to thread the needle there with. If it would have backed up a couple of weeks, we'd have ended up missing fall of 2020, which would have been unfortunate. But as it worked out, we were able to get through everything.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. Um, so tell me little bit about the facility itself. Um, you've already mentioned some things like the three dump pits and stuff, but why don't we do a thing where how I always like to word it is, tell me what happens with a truckload of grain as it kind of goes through the facility.
Sure. So we've got the RFID system, which I think today is pretty standard. So producer comes in, he's got a card that's got his entity on it. So he swipes his card when he first comes through the system. That brings up his name, and um, from there he proceeds to the probe. We probe the grain, put the grade on the ticket. From there he goes to our first scale, and then he swipes his card again and weighs himself.
Okay.
Proceeds through the facility at one of the three pits that we've told him to go to based on his sample of grain. So he goes through and hits the pits, dumps, comes back through the second scale, the outbound scale, swipes his card again to weigh himself empty, and then it
Okay.
produces a ticket right on the scale, and he's on his way.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it's got the facility's three dump pits, like I mentioned, with 25,000 bushel an hour legs
Mhm.
taking the grain away. We've got it's 1.4 million of upright capacity with 17 total bends. There's 8 big silos, 860, about 165,000 bushels in each silo. And then there's what we call interstice bends between the round silos. So when you add it all up, there's 17 total bends at about
Wow.
1.4 million bushels.
All right.
And
Very
we
cool.
load trains on the BNs. We load shuttle trains, so 110 car trains.
Okay.
It's if you're interested in this information, but it's an 80,000 bushel an hour bulk weigher that we use to load out.
Mm-hmm.
And then the system is completely automated.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Um, so you have your own fleet of trucks too. Do you use those to move grain between the two locations then?
We'll actually use it to transfer grain from our satellite locations. We've got some towns that are 18 miles, 15 to 18 miles away from Herman.
Okay.
So as the farmer brings grain to those locations, Chickayo and Morris, then we'll
Mm-hmm.
transfer them with our trucks from Chickayo and Morris into the Herman market. And we also do some picked up on the farm. So if
Mm-hmm.
the producer wants us to haul it, we'll just take
Oh, cool.
our trucks and pick it up right at their farm and haul it right into Herman.
Very cool. Um, sorry, just a moment.
Yep.
So, um, how many employees do you have on site then?
At this specific, at the new terminal we only have 2 employees on a daily basis,
Wow.
and then more with when a train is here to load.
So you have some pretty impressive automation then.
We do. The what I would call what is probably now today the standard automation, where everything's on a screen to start your legs and start your conveyors. It's just clicking a mouse, and you click on the leg and it starts the leg, and you click on the conveyor, it starts the conveyor, or you click on uh, the bend you want to go to, and it opens up that slide.
Nice.
So all of it's all automated that way. And so you
Okay.
can control that from various points at our location. Over at the place where we receive grain, we've got a office there.
Mhm.
Where we probe the grain, we have an office, and that same system can be controlled from that office. And then when we're loading grain, that same system also is uh, visible, and you can control everything I just described from our loadout building as well. So
Very cool.
that's the automation part. So you can run it. Quite honestly, you could run the facility with one person with everything I just described,
Yeah.
and you could do it from, like I say, multiple locations. So on some days we could do this with one person and be just fine. And
Very
then
nice.
yeah, and then there's the reason for the article, I think, is the totally automated system, and so that's the piece that we're working on. Do you want to talk about that right now, or?
Yeah, let's talk about that while we're on the subject.
Okay, so what we're trying to put in place is a completely automated facility where there doesn't need to be anyone on site. Um,
Okay.
so how that would work is, again, very much the same process as I described earlier. The
Mhm.
difference would be when we're in the automated mode, the truck would have a little puck, and
Mm.
I'm going to reference guys that are hauling with semi. It doesn't need to be
Okay.
a semi, but that's how I'll describe it. So on the semi trailer, there's a little puck that will have be just behind the front of the trailer, and as that comes through, that identifies the characteristics of the trailer,
Hmm.
and that allows us to probe when he moves from that very first kiosk into where he sits for the probe position. After we go through the first time and we position the truck there, and we basically teach the probe where it can probe, where
Okay.
it won't hit any of the bows,
Mm.
and it won't hit any of the straps on the truck. And then it
Oh,
also knows how deep it can probe, so it doesn't hit the bottom of the truck. So
Okay.
that's the piece for the very first time it goes through the system. And
Okay.
once it does that, that puck is those characteristics that I just described, that goes on to that puck.
Hmm.
And so now the next time that it comes through the system, it knows this is your truck. It knows that this is where it can probe, and it'll randomly probe a couple of times in the front hopper, and it'll randomly probe a couple of times in the back hopper.
Hmm.
It'll take that grain inside the facility. It automatically puts it through our grading equipment. So it'll
Okay.
check the FM, check the moisture, check the test weight. And from there, it creates the grade, puts the grade into our system, and then it knows that you're hauling number 2 yellow corn.
Wow.
And so what it's going to say behind the scenes, we've got a matrix set up that basically is saying number 2 yellow corn goes into this particular bin.
Hmm.
So once it's all graded and once it's got the grade on the ticket, it tells you to proceed to pit number 1 because that's where your quality of grain needs to be dumped.
Wow.
And
Wow.
the rest of the system is the same, hits the scale, etc. Goes through the system. We've got some checks and balances in place. Again, that puck reader, if you would happen to get into the wrong line. So
Okay.
let's say we tell you to go to pit number 1 and you get around there and you forgot what pit you were supposed to go to and it's in pit number 2.
Yeah.
That puck reader helps decipher that because we've got puck readers throughout the process. And before it comes into the pit, then it says, hold on, Steve, you're supposed to be in pit number 1. You're in pit number 2. No problem. Give us a minute. We're going to clear out the system. We're going to, because we know that you've got number 2 yellow corn, once we get the system cleared out, we're going to change the bends. Be patient, sit tight, and when we get the bends cleared out, we'll let
Nice.
you proceed and dump in pit number 2, even though you should have been in pit number 1.
Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah, that's far and away above your kind of standard automation.
Yeah, it's yeah, it's quite honestly, we started working on this piece of it about 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
Jim Gale's our construction lead. We were working on the project, the elevator project.
Mhm.
And when we got done talking about that, he said, I want to run another idea by you. And he explained this process. And I just, I looked at him not believing it could happen. And he said, well, most of it is already out there. We got to
Yeah.
kind of hook it all together and make it happen.
Wow.
And so I didn't believe him right away. And quite honestly, what we had set up right away was going to be unique to this facility.
Okay.
And so the only thing I pushed back on is I said, Jim, if we can really do this, we need to make it so it can be scaled so we can take it to the other locations that I'm running and other CHS locations.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, and I remember him crumpling up the paper and throwing it away because that wasn't going to be scalable. And he came back about a month later and said, all right, let's look at this one. And that's the one we've been working on for the last 2.5 years. And,
Wow.
we can see the finish line. So hopefully we get there here in the next 30 days.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like quite the event. A true lights out facility, which
Yeah.
has
Yes.
kind of been the industry goal for what, the last 10 years now or something like that. So
Right.
that's great.
Right. Yeah. It's encouraging that the automation is kind of leading the industry, but it's keeping up with the industry as well. And in a
Hmm.
time when, and employees are hard to find, and
Yeah,
this is
definitely.
gonna this is gonna this is going to help us create a better work-life balance for our employees.
Yeah.
The ag industry is a lot of hours, and it's a lot
Hmm.
of hours in a hurry.
Yeah.
It's weekends and nights and holidays a lot of times when you're dumping grain and loading grain. And
Yeah,
so
if you have
this is
that
gonna
train coming in, you gotta go when you gotta go, right?
we have to load it whenever it comes in. So it gives
Yep.
us, like I say, a little work-life balance. So it should allow us to not always have to have facility staff.
Yeah.
It also, this is the other reason we did it. Really, there's three things involved with the decision: work-life
Mhm.
balance for our employee.
Okay.
The second one, a better customer experience because now
Mhm.
we're going to be able to extend the hours that we can receive grain
Yeah.
without having to have an employee here. So the producer likes it. And the
Mhm.
last one is accomplishes our safety goals with, not a, again, we should be able to provide a better work-life balance. And when people aren't fatigued, um,
Yeah.
you know, things just don't happen like they do when you're fatigued. So those are the three goals when we started out with this whole thing is how do we make a work-life balance? How do we make it a good customer experience? And how do we do all that and create a better safety environment?
Wow. No, that's very impressive. I'm excited to hear more. I'm excited for your first test to go well. I'm sure it will.
It's
But it's
everybody's chewing their fingernails, but we're getting there.
no, that's great. Wow. So, switch topics a little bit. How was the town? How was that kind of process? How were they supportive? Did you have a lot of support from the local community to kind of build and expand or
Oh, for sure. It's a farm community, and we've needed to freshen up our grain asset in Herman for a while. So this was lots of support and lots of enthusiasm, and everybody's excited to use it. It's done everything that we thought it would and more. In fact, I've had
oh
producers that have come in and just have said, "Wow, I can't believe how fast it is and how much you can do." They're very impressed, and it's worked very well with 1 year under our belt.
wow. That sounds amazing. Um all right. And uh how many um how many types of grain you guys kind of take in? Because you said you had 18 bins. That's what gives you quite
Yep.
the ability to take in quite a variety, right?
Right, 17 bins, but they typically we're in corn and bean country. We will also handle wheat, but we primarily handle just corn, wheat, and beans with where
Okay.
we're located. And
Uh,
the vast majority of it, we're 90% of it's corn and beans. We've kind of moved out of the wheat belt and into the corn belt in the
mm,
last several years, and so that's really where we're at.
where are you guys located in Minnesota? I didn't look it up on a map.
Yeah. So we'd be northwest of the Twin Cities,
Okay.
about 170 miles. I should Google it to be sure, but I can do that while we're on the phone. But it's about 170 miles northwest of the Twin Cities.
Very cool. I'm from Wisconsin myself, and it's always hard to talk to people because one of our favorite things here is to complain about how cold it is.
Yeah.
And then, but you talk to someone in Minnesota, and they're like, I'm like, oh, it's like 0 degrees here, and they're like, oh, it's -20 here, not too bad.
Yep. You learn to live with it, for sure.
Yeah. But that's great. So I'm almost out of questions. Done a great job explaining everything so far. My last one is what I ask everyone. It's kind of what are some of the things that you're most excited about with this new uh, grain elevator?
Um, the fact that it's created a better experience for our grower, first
Hmm.
and foremost, and that happens through, again, having multiple places for him to dump his grain.
Sure.
So it's already created a better experience for our producer. It's more of an in and out feature versus having to wait in line.
Mhm.
So that's first, and we've already accomplished that. And then obviously the second one is this automated feature where we won't have to have anybody on site when the
Yeah.
producer hauls. And I can think of examples every year we get that. Speaking of being from Wisconsin, every year we get that warm up sometime throughout the winter
Yep.
where all of a sudden it gets to 35 degrees for no reason at all for 3 days.
Hmm.
If that happens on a weekend, the farmer is just out of luck, right? Because we're closed on
Yeah.
the weekend. Uh, Here he could have maybe kids are home from college. It's going to be 35 degrees and he wants to haul a bunch of grain. We can do that
Hmm.
without having to sacrifice that work-life balance.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's even like during harvest when they're
Yes.
out there harvesting at 10 o'clock at night,
Yep.
the ability to send that grain and not have to wait till the next morning is pretty
Yep.
huge deal.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. So that's the other thing that we're excited about is being able to supply that, or supply the extended hours without having to burn out our people.
Nice.
Yep.
All right. I think that's all the questions I have for you, unless you think I missed anything big.
No, I think we hit. It helped that you sent out, or somebody sent out the kind of questions you were going to ask. So I think we covered just about everything that I reviewed in my mind. So I think we're good.
Excellent.